I found my wife's affair with our neighbor, then discovered she secretly transferred $250, $0 from our joint account into her new lover's name. Now she's claiming the house and all our savings in a bitter custody and property battle. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy to catch his wife cheating on him, especially not in the way I did. It all started with little things, her phone ringing at odd hours, her sudden interest in hiding her texts, and her always finding some excuse to stay late at work or visit her sister. I brushed it off at first, convincing myself maybe she was just stressed or tired. But then I noticed her behavior changing in ways that didn't add up. She became more secretive, more dismissive of me, and I started feeling like I was losing her, even though we still shared the same bed every night. One afternoon, I came home early from work, something I rarely did, and I caught her in the act. She was in our bedroom topless with our neighbor, Jeff. I'd seen Jeff around, a decent guy, but nothing I ever suspected he'd be involved with my wife. The moment I opened the door, she froze, eyes wide with guilt. Jeff looked caught too, but his expression was more annoyed than ashamed. My wife, Lisa, tried to brush it off, acting like I was overreacting, saying, "It's nothing, I swear, we're just talking." But her tone was defensive and her cheeks flushed. I could see the lie in her eyes immediately. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling around what I'd seen, trying to make sense of it. I started digging into her phone, her emails, anything that could give me a clue. I found nothing obvious at first, but then I remembered her mentioning a late-night business trip she took a few weeks ago. She told me she was meeting with some clients, but I never saw any receipts or photos. I decided to check our bank accounts, thinking maybe I'd find some clues there. That's when I saw it, an enormous transfer of $250, $0 from our joint account into an account under Jeff's name. That was a huge chunk of money, and I knew it wasn't just some coincidence. I sat there staring at the screen, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. How could she do this? How could she take our savings, our future, and give it to some guy she barely knew? I couldn't even process it at first. My mind raced through all the memories, the dinners, the vacations, the plans we made. I thought about the house we bought together, our kids' college funds, everything I'd worked so hard for. And now she was claiming she deserved it all because she was entitled, as she put it, to her own happiness. That was her excuse when I confronted her about the money later. Said she'd earned it, that I was just a paycheck to her. The betrayal hit harder than I ever thought possible. It wasn't just the affair. It was the fact that she'd secretly transferred our money, our life savings, into Jeff's account. She claimed she was just trying to get ahead, that she didn't mean for me to find out this way. But I knew better. I could see her lies unraveling every time she spun some new story, trying to make me feel guilty or like I was overreacting. She kept insisting, "You don't understand, it's complicated," or "Jeff's just a friend, I swear." But I wasn't buying it anymore. I could see the truth plain as day. She was cheating, stealing, and trying to manipulate her way out of it. I felt a storm of emotions, anger, sadness, betrayal, and a deep sense of loss. I'd been with Lisa for over 10 years, and I thought we had something real. But now I saw her for what she truly was, a liar who'd been sneaking around behind my back, spending our hard-earned money on some guy, and pretending everything was fine. I didn't sleep that night, just staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what I'd do next. The trust was gone, shattered beyond repair. I knew I had to confront her, but I also knew that my life was about to change forever. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding head and a stomach full of knots. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been hit by a freight train. I knew I had to face Lisa, but I also knew I needed a plan. I couldn't just storm in and accuse her without evidence, not without knowing exactly how deep this rabbit hole went. I decided to do some digging first, get more proof, understand her game, and prepare myself emotionally. I started by reviewing the bank transactions again, looking for any other suspicious activity. Sure enough, there were multiple transfers over the past few months, Small amounts here, larger ones there, adding up to that $250, $0, all funneled into Jeff's account. I also checked her phone records, her emails, her social media. Nothing suspicious there yet. She was careful or maybe just lucky, but I knew she'd cover her tracks. Still, I kept digging. I needed to know if she'd hidden anything else, if there were other men involved, or if Jeff was just a pawn in her game. A few hours later, I found something that made my blood boil. An email from Lisa to Jeff, sent a week before I found her with him. It was a simple message. "I can't do this anymore. I need to see you tonight. It's our chance to start fresh." That was the moment I realized she'd been planning this, orchestrating her betrayal for some time. It wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment thing. She'd been sneaking around, stealing our money, and lying to my face for months. I knew I couldn't let her get away with it. I had to confront her, but I also had to be smart about it. I needed an airtight case, evidence that she couldn't deny. So I printed out everything, bank statements, emails, texts, and set them aside. Then I decided to wait. I wanted her to come home, thinking she still had the upper hand so I could catch her in her own lies. My mind was racing. I had to be prepared for whatever she threw at me, whether it was more lies, tears, or outright denial. When she finally walked through the door that evening, she looked different, more defensive, maybe a little guilty. I could see it in her eyes. She knew I'd found out. She started with her usual bullshit, trying to deny everything, saying she was just stressed, or "it's complicated," or "I didn't mean for you to find out this way." But I held up the printed evidence and cut her off. I asked her directly about the transfer, about Jeff, about the affair. The truth spilled out in bits and pieces. She was having an affair with Jeff, had been for months, and she'd transferred our money into his account to support her new lifestyle. Her excuses sounded hollow, like she'd rehearsed them 100 times. She said she deserved to be happy, that I was too controlling, that she'd been feeling trapped. That Jeff made her feel alive again, and that the money was just a way to escape the misery she claimed I'd put her through. I felt my blood boiling. How could she be so selfish, so manipulative? She was lying, gaslighting, trying to make me feel guilty for catching her, but I wasn't going to let her win. Not this time. I told her I'd had enough, that I wasn't going to be a pawn in her game anymore. She looked stunned, then angry. She yelled, called me all sorts of names, accused me of being paranoid, of not trusting her. But I knew the truth. I knew she'd planned this, orchestrated her escape, and used our life savings to do it. I told her I was done. Listening to her lies, that I wanted a divorce and that I was taking back what was mine. I was done being the fool who believed her sob stories. I told her I'd call a lawyer and I'd see her in court. The aftermath was a whirlwind. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her, screaming that I was ruining everything. I sat alone, feeling numb but also strangely relieved. I'd uncovered everything, finally seen her for who she really was, an unfaithful, manipulative bitch who betrayed everything we built together. I knew it was going to get messy, that she'd fight me tooth and nail over the house, the savings, the kids, but I was done playing her game. I felt a strange mix of anger and sorrow, but deep down I knew I had to stand my ground. I wasn't going to let her destroy me, not after everything. That night I stayed up late, drafting a plan. I knew she'd try to claim the house and all the money, that she'd spin stories to make herself look innocent. But I had the evidence, and I was ready to fight for what was mine. I realized that sometimes you have to lose everything before you can truly see what you're fighting for. She thought she could walk all over me, but I was done being the victim. Now, it was time to take control, no matter how ugly the battle might get. The next few days were a blur of calls, meetings, and legal consultations. I didn't sleep much, and honestly, I didn't want to. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, her smug look when she thought she'd gotten away with everything. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I knew this wasn't just about the money or the affair anymore. It was about reclaiming my life from someone I thought I knew, someone I loved. Now I saw her for what she really was, a liar and a manipulator who had used me, our marriage, and everything we built as her personal playground. I hired a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Carol who specialized in divorce and property disputes. I laid out everything, Her affair, the transfer of our savings, the lies, her attempts to gaslight me into doubting my own judgment. Carol told me I had a strong case, especially because of the evidence I had collected. She warned me that Lisa would fight dirty, probably try to claim she was entitled to half the house, and maybe even accuse me of abuse or neglect just to muddy the waters. I knew she'd do anything to keep her new life afloat, even if it meant dragging me through hell. Meanwhile, I decided to dig even deeper. I hired a private investigator to look into Jeff. I wanted to know if he was just a pawn or if he was also involved in some financial schemes. Turns out Jeff had a shady background, several small fraud charges, some unpaid debts, and a history of shady business dealings. That confirmed my suspicions. He wasn't just some innocent guy caught in her web. He was just as involved as she was, maybe more. I kept this information to myself for now. I didn't want to give her any reason to spin more lies or turn the court against me. The legal process kicked off quickly. Lisa was furious, of course. She tried to manipulate the situation, claiming I was abandoning her, that she was the victim here. She accused me of being overly controlling and said I didn't support her dreams. That was rich coming from her, considering she just betrayed me, stolen our money, and was caught in bed with our neighbor. I kept my cool, though. I knew I had the facts, and I wasn't going to let her derail the process with her lies. One day, I got a surprise visit from her lawyer. They wanted to negotiate a settlement, but I knew better. I wasn't about to settle for her empty promises and fake tears. I demanded a full accounting of all the money she transferred, the house, and custody arrangements for the kids. The lawyer looked uneasy but eventually agreed to a court date. I felt a mixture of relief and dread. I was finally taking control, but I knew the fight was far from over. Meanwhile, Lisa was not just fighting me. She was trying to turn the kids against me. She told them I was abandoning the family, that I was the bad guy. I could see her playing the victim in front of them, twisting everything so she'd come out on top. It hurt to see her manipulate the kids like that, but I also knew I had to stay strong. I made sure to be honest with them, to tell them I loved them and that I was fighting for what was right. I didn't want them to think I was the villain. I just wanted the truth to come out. The more I uncovered, the angrier I got. Her lies, her betrayal, they cut deep. She'd always seemed like a strong, independent woman, but now I saw her as someone who'd do anything for money and a new lover. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I'd been so blind. But I also realized that sometimes love blinds you. It's easy to ignore the red flags when you're invested in someone, but once you see the truth, there's no going back. I started to prepare emotionally for the court battle. I knew she'd try to spin this into some poor Lisa story, painting herself as the victim, but I was ready. I had the evidence, I had my resolve, and I was determined to fight for what's rightfully mine. I also started thinking about my future, what I wanted, what I deserved. I learned that you can't trust everyone, and sometimes the people you love the most will turn out to be the biggest betrayals. But at the end of the day, I knew I had to stand tall and fight for myself and my kids. I owed us that much. The court date finally arrived, and I was more anxious than I'd ever been. Sitting in that stiff, sterile courtroom, I felt like I was on trial myself, trying to prove that I was the wronged party, that Lisa's lies and betrayal had wrecked everything we built. She showed up looking polished, her face carefully neutral, but I could see the flicker of her eyes, guilty, nervous, maybe even scared. Jeff didn't come, of course. I had a feeling he was hiding behind his shady background, just waiting for the dust to settle so he could slip away quietly. Lisa's attorney tried to argue that Lisa deserved a fair share of the house and the savings, claiming she was just trying to start anew, that her affair was a mistake she regretted. She even had the nerve to cry, saying she didn't mean for it to go this far, that she was trying to find herself. I clenched my fists. I wanted to yell to expose her lies, but I kept my composure. I had the evidence, and I knew that would speak louder than her crocodile tears. In her testimony, Lisa spun her story differently. She said she'd been feeling unsupported and stifled in our marriage. That Jeff made her feel alive again, that she'd transferred the money because she wanted to escape the monotony and start fresh. She insisted she loved the kids and that her affair was just a mistake. but I knew better. I had the proof of the affair, the transfer of our money, and her shady dealings with Jeff. I also had witnesses, our neighbors, who'd seen her sneaking around, and the bank statements that proved the money transfer was no accident. When it was my turn, I laid out everything, how she'd lied, cheated, and stolen from me. I showed the court the emails, the bank transfer records, and the evidence of her affair. I told them how she'd manipulated me into believing she was just stressed, how she'd used our savings to support her new lover, and how she tried to turn the kids against me. I didn't hold back. I wanted the court to see her for what she truly was, a dishonest, manipulative woman who betrayed her family in the worst way. The judge listened carefully, asking questions, weighing the evidence. I could see the wheels turning in her mind as she considered everything. After what felt like hours, she finally made her ruling. She awarded me primary custody of the kids, citing Lisa's infidelity and financial misconduct as reasons. She ordered Lisa to return the transferred funds and stipulated that the house be sold, with the proceeds divided fairly. Lisa looked stunned, then furious. She tried to argue to plead her case, but the judge was firm. She said, "This court finds that the evidence shows clear misconduct on the part of the respondent, and the best interests of the children require a different arrangement." As I left the courtroom, I felt a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. I'd fought hard and I'd won some battles, but I knew the war wasn't over. Lisa was already scheming, probably planning her next move to get her way. I also knew that I had to focus on rebuilding my life, on healing from the betrayal. I looked at my kids, my little anchors, and felt a wave of protectiveness wash over me. They deserved stability, honesty, and love, and I was determined to give it to them no matter what. In the days that followed, Lisa's true colors kept revealing themselves. She filed an appeal claiming I was trying to ruin her, that I'd fabricated evidence or manipulated the system. But I had everything documented, everything solid. I knew she'd try to fight dirty, but I was ready. I also took steps to secure the house and our savings, changing locks, freezing accounts, ensuring she couldn't siphon off any more money. I realized how fragile everything was, how trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to repair. But I also learned that standing up for yourself, even when it's ugly and messy, is the only way to reclaim your dignity. It was a brutal process, no doubt. But I'd come to see that sometimes the only way to truly move on is to confront the betrayal head-on. I had lost a lot, my wife, my savings, my sense of security, but I gained clarity. I learned that I was stronger than I thought, and that no amount of lies or manipulation could keep me down if I fought for what was right. The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew I'd come out of this battered, yes, but also wiser, and maybe, just maybe, ready to start over. The months that followed were a whirlwind of legal motions, court dates, and emotional roller coasters. Lisa continued to fight, trying every trick in the book to turn the tide in her favor. She hired her own lawyer, hired private investigators on my side, and even tried to smear my name, claiming I was an unfit father and that I'd been emotionally abusive. I knew it was all part of her desperate attempt to hold on to her life of lies, but I refused to be dragged down by her manipulations. I focused on the kids, making sure they saw that I was there for them, consistent, honest, and committed. I kept telling them I loved them, that I was fighting for them to have a safe, stable home. I also started rebuilding my life outside of the chaos, getting a new job, moving into a smaller apartment, and trying to forget about the nightmare that had become our marriage. It wasn't easy. There were nights I'd lie awake, replaying everything, wondering if I'd made the right decisions, questioning whether I could really trust anyone again. Meanwhile, Lisa's attempts to undermine me grew more frantic. She accused me of all kinds of things, saying I'd hidden money, that I'd been unfaithful myself, even that I was trying to keep her from seeing the kids. None of it held water, but that didn't stop her from trying to spin her stories. I knew her game by now. She was desperate, cornered, and willing to do anything to keep her new life intact. I just had to stay strong and let the evidence speak for itself. One day, I received a call from my lawyer. She had uncovered some new information. Lisa had been transferring additional funds out of the house account, trying to hide more money from the court. She'd also been contacting Jeff behind my back, trying to get him to testify on her behalf, though Jeff refused, knowing he'd be exposed for his shady dealings. It was clear she was willing to burn everything down to save herself. I was furious, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. The more she fought, the more her own lies unraveled. The final court hearing was approaching fast. I knew Lisa would pull out all the stops, more accusations, more lies, anything to sway the judge. But I had my evidence, my witnesses, and the truth. I was ready. I sat there in that courtroom knowing I'd done everything I could to protect myself and my kids. I looked at Lisa, her face flushed with anger and frustration, and I realized how much she'd sacrificed. Her integrity, her honesty, our marriage, all for her own selfish needs. When the judge finally made her ruling, it was a decisive victory for me. She ordered Lisa to pay back all the stolen money, awarded me full custody of the children, and mandated that the house be sold, with the proceeds split fairly. Lisa's lawyer tried to object, claiming she was the victim, that I'd manipulated her, but the judge wasn't buying it. She dismissed her arguments and emphasized that Lisa's misconduct was the core reason for the decision. As I left the courtroom, I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. It was finally over, at least the legal battle. But the emotional scars remained. I knew trusting again would take time, and I knew Lisa would never truly change. Still, I was determined to move forward. I had my kids, I had my dignity, and I had the clarity that comes from facing the worst and surviving it. I learned some hard lessons about trust, about betrayal, about the importance of standing up for yourself. And I knew that, no matter how deep the betrayal, life always moves forward. Sometimes painfully, sometimes slowly, but always forward. I was ready to rebuild, to start fresh, and to leave that nightmare behind me once and for all. Would you like me to continue with the final part? In the aftermath of everything, I've come to realize just how much betrayal can shake you to your core, but also how resilient you can be when you finally decide to take control. The court's decision was a relief, but the real healing started afterward. I had to learn to trust myself again, to believe that I could rebuild my life without the woman who once seemed like my everything. The kids are adjusting, and I'm doing my best to give them the stability they deserve, even if it's not perfect. I've also started therapy, something I should have done years ago, to work through the anger, sadness, and betrayal I felt. Looking back, I see how blind I was for so long. Lisa's bitchy, manipulative side was always lurking beneath the surface, hiding behind her pretty smiles and sweet words. I never wanted to believe she could do something so destructive, but the truth was in the evidence I uncovered. If I could give anyone advice from this experience, it would be to trust your instincts and don't ignore the red flags. When something feels off, dig deeper. Don't let anyone gaslight you into thinking you're overreacting or paranoid. The truth will come out eventually, and it's better to face it head-on. I also learned that money isn't just paper or numbers. It's tied to trust, security, and your future. Lisa's betrayal was rooted in greed and selfishness, and losing that money hurt more than I want to admit. But what hurts even more was realizing how much I'd been blind to her true nature. Now I'm more cautious, more aware, and more determined to protect what's mine. I won't let anyone manipulate or steal from me again. I've learned that standing your ground, even when it's painful, is the only way to reclaim your dignity. The biggest lesson, though, is that life goes on. No matter how dark things seem, there's always a chance to start over. I've found a new purpose in rebuilding my relationship with my kids, in focusing on my own happiness, and in reminding myself that I deserve honesty and respect. Betrayal is a brutal teacher, but it also reveals who you really are: strong, resilient, capable of moving forward even when everything feels broken. So here I am, a man who's been through the worst but refused to stay down. I've learned that sometimes the only way to find peace is to confront the chaos, face the truth, and then choose to move on. The scars will always be there, but they remind me of how far I've come. And I know now that I am enough, worthy of love, respect, and a life built on honesty. That's what I'll carry with me from this nightmare: hope, resilience, and the unbreakable belief that better days are ahead.